I kind of miss those episodes where I never used to take shit too seriously, where I rant about shit for like 12 to 15 minutes, and it's just me taking a bash at people, and I do it so unapologetically, and it used to be so much fun. Like, I kind of miss those days, but at the same time, I understand why I'm serious right now, which is why for this episode, I am going to try and have a mix of both, but as I do that, I'm going to discuss picking up girls from a guy's perspective, but also why we need to start avoiding some girls, particularly the young ones. But before I can get into any of that, I want to start things off by talking about the online presenter for the YouTube channel Hot Ones, known as Sean Evans, who recently broke up with his porn star girlfriend, now ex-girlfriend Melissa Stratton, 24 hours after they made headlines. Now, I know most of this information and whatever the hell I said is mostly pointless for most people. It's just to think about the fact that this guy broke up with his girlfriend 24 hours after they got into a relationship. You have to wonder, what exactly did this guy hear about her or watch, since she's a porn star, that made him suddenly think, you know what, even though she sucks dick, I don't think she's worthy enough to tell me.
The royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
Okay, that was probably one of the smartest way to segue in that intro sound, but hey, anyways, like, a porn star's been mentioned. What exactly did you guys expect me to do with that piece of information? Like, the fact that dude got into a relationship with her, and by all means, there's nothing wrong with you dating a porn star. If that's who you want to date, that's who you want to date. That's a you thing. But the fact that the guy kind of got into the relationship and for 24 hours it was pure bliss. Nigga probably got his 30 seconds of absolute pleasure, at least maybe a few times, and then after all of that, he suddenly like, unlike your cream pie scenes, unfortunately, I kind of have to pull out here. Like, it seems a little bit hard to consider what it is that made dude change his mind. And when I saw this story online, there was a very tiny caption that came with it. So I'm just going to read it and then maybe it'll have a little bit of information on this entire thing. So it says, and I quote, Sean allegedly called her up on Valentine's Day and broke up with her, telling her he wanted to call it quits because of the media attention they were getting, which she found to be weird since he paraded her all around Super Bowl weekend. End quote. Okay, so the number of things that can make someone decide, you know what, I really want to date a porn star, then 24 hours be like, you know what, I can't do this. One, maybe the very late version of post-nut clarity. That one can work. Because as guys, we can sort of understand that a lot of the decisions that we make, sometimes we will make them because we're horny or majorly because we're horny. And, sometimes we need a little bit of that post-nut clarity so that we can come to our senses. No pun intended. Although, in this case, even though you were to call it a late case of post-nut clarity, like, post-nut clarity is post-nut clarity because it comes after the nut and it's usually soon after the nut. So, not unless if dude was beating his meat to her content and realized that she was being railed by 5 dudes and suddenly thought through everything after nutting, it wouldn't entirely make sense for him to call on Valentine's Day and just be like, look, I can't do this anymore. Like, it just seems like this guy got enough negative attention by, him saying that he's dating this very fine woman, and every nigga is like, yeah. Oh yeah, the one that usually gets railed by a couple of different dudes. And then now he fully realizes the fact that he's dating a porn star that everyone has seen naked, everyone has seen getting fucked, everyone has seen in some sort of vulnerable position or a position where she seems to be taken advantage of for the sake of the scene. And, there's no particular dignity that can sort of restore all of that. And suddenly dude is like, yo, I am not ready for the kind of negative press that comes with this. And I honestly don't think these boobs are worth the kind of squeeze that will be taken on my mental health. So I might as well just end it here. Which is sad because I do think that porn stars need love too. They need to make it. But anyways, all that to say, it's pretty sad, and it's clearly proof that not every relationship survives Valentine's Day. And with that said, I can now start the podcast with a little bit more familiarity, maybe a dash more energy, and some instrumentals in the background by saying, welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who knows how to behave like a porn star's relationship and come to some sort of conclusion at the end of it. He's a man who believes that astrology should have been the study of ass. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. This episode has started in a slightly unfamiliar but also slightly familiar way, because in as much as people didn't even know the people that I was talking about, it's like most people can just resonate with the whole porn star shagging and coming bits. Although, then again, this is me making an assumption that everyone has experienced it, of which I'm not entirely sure that that's the case. But all in all, welcome to the Breaktime Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you listen all the way till the end. There's actually some pretty interesting shit that's coming up. And more so if you're a guy or a gal that just so happens to be single, this information in the main topic might actually be a little bit more useful to you, or it might prompt you to give some sort of feedback. But before I can get into any of that, I want to first start by talking about the fact that I'm actually supposed to be going on break, and I should have given word on this. Now, normally, for those of y'all that don't know, I usually take some sort of a break after 12 weeks of producing episodes so that I can be ready for the next season. Now, normally, whenever I take my breaks, it's not like I take an actual break and I stop producing content. I usually will have shorter content, less edited, more raw, and it's usually particularly short, somewhere in the 12 to 15 minute region. But for the most part, that's what will be coming for the next 2 to 3 weeks, as I sort of get some chance to, kind of just peel back a little bit, allow myself to rest and rejuvenate myself before I can come back and continue producing more episodes for the next 12 weeks after that. So that'll be happening from next week, and usually it's like a one topic per episode kind of thing, of which if there's any topics you'd want me to discuss in detail, then as usual the DMs are always open, and the links to my social media are usually in the description below, or you'll just hear them when I talk about them at the end of the episode. Now, with that said, we can move things on, and before I get to the main topic, there was something that I noticed online which I feel just needs to be discussed because of how dire it actually is. Now, there was a very recent study that came out showing that apparently there are 696 young girls getting pregnant every single day in our country, which I found to be absolutely wild, and I thought that it was a pack of bull, so I decided to go to the newspaper article that had that study and read it. And the wildest part about it is it's actually true, at least as per the report. And to give details, it says, and I quote, "Some 696 adolescent girls were impregnated daily last year, according to the National Syndemic Diseases Council CEO Ruth Laibon Masha, highlighting the council's latest findings at the ongoing 14th Kenya Medical Research Institute Annual Scientific and Health Conference. She said Kenya still has a lot of work to do. She said, and I quote, 55% of the 1,499,514 pregnancies that occurred in the country in 2023 were among adolescents and young women aged 10 to 24 years, whereas 17%, which is 254,753, were among adolescent girls aged 10 to 19, translating into 696 adolescent pregnancies in a day." End quote. She also said that despite the country registering remarkable progress in the fight against HIV, with new cases dropping from a high of 101,448 in 2013 to 22,154 in 2022, which translates to a 78.2% reduction over the last decade, the curve is not flattening fast enough. Okay, let me just end quote it here. Alright, because the part about the 17%, the 254,753 girls aged 10 to 19 who got pregnant over the past year is wild to me. And it was so wild that I decided to go ahead and do the math myself and just do the simple division. And it's even worse than what it says, because I kind of noticed that these guys did the division by 366, which accounts for a leap year, of which last year wasn't. So technically, the number itself is about 697.9 something, which is technically 698 teen pregnancies a day. But the bottom line is, around 700 girls approximately are getting pregnant every single day aged 10 to 19. Do you know how wild that shit is? That shit in and of itself is actually a little bit scary, because the reality of it could even be worse, because I'm not entirely sure how it is that these guys picked up on that information, but imagine the women who found out that they were pregnant through their own private means. So they just got the test kit from a chemist and they tested themselves, and they probably went and got an abortion. Like, you think about adding those numbers there, as well as the number of people who, they had a partner that pulled out or used protection. And the number of young girls that are having sex before they're even 20 years old is absolutely wild. Like, honestly speaking, the only thing that was clicking in my head after I read this and I thought through everything was the To Me Chill campaign that happened like 15, 16, 17, maybe 18 years ago needs to be brought back. Because honestly, I feel like kids are having too much sex nowadays, and too many of them do not fully understand the consequences that come with that shit. Like, the problem that's out there right now is there's too many people that are having a shit ton of sex, and they're doing it in a very haphazard manner. People aren't talking about safety. People aren't talking about exercising restraint. Kids are just having sex everywhere these days. And it's actually quite saddening. And at first I was about to go and start saying, the older guys are the problem here and we need to start castrating people, blah, blah, blah. But a friend of mine on Twitter, where I saw the article, actually went and commented when I was busy talking about it and mentioned that according to some other research that he saw, a good number of the people who are getting these girls pregnant are also kids of around the same ages. So I'm honestly thinking that maybe we bring back the To Me Chill campaign and we bring back a shit ton of sex ed in schools so that we can curb these numbers, because goodness my, like, a 10-year-old getting pregnant is absolutely wild, and it's incredibly scary because you're literally seeing a kid about to have a kid not even knowing how to take care of a kid, because there's a lot of them that don't really know how to nurture and take care of a kid, and how taxing that shit actually is. And this also affects the guys, because you think about the young guys that are getting these girls pregnant, and you're thinking some of these guys might actually learn to be deadbeats even before they learn to be adults. Like, can you think of how wild that shit is? And I'm not advocating for someone to be a deadbeat or anything, but like, this is also someone who's also being forced to be a father before he even becomes an adult, which is also quite wild. But hey, all in all, I personally feel like we need to bring back more abstinence campaigns. We need a shit ton more sex ed in schools, because honestly, people are flying off the rails and people do not know the dangers of having sex while super young. And honestly, not unless if we start informing them on this shit, they're going to continue having a shit ton of very, very reckless sex. And with that, I am going to leave it there and move it on to our main topic of this episode, which in some way, shape or form is almost a contradiction of whatever it is that I just spoke about. Because to be honest, it's literally about picking up women. Like, I'm busy telling people to hold back, and at the same time I'm about to start telling guys about trying to pick up a babe, which is a bit of like a contradiction, but at the same time it's kind of not, because it's not like I'm telling guys to go ahead and start trying to pick up like high school girls or anything. I'm trying to show guys how to pick up babes that are actually of age, fully grown adults and shit like that. Just mostly because I feel like it's something that needs to be discussed. Also, if you remember the last episode that I did, I was busy talking about how we need to bring back guys talking about hitting on women and trying to pick up girls, so that a lot of today's men can learn, or at least relearn, if not be informed, on how it is that it's considered good or safe to pick up a woman, and when it's actually a little too much or you're probably forcing issues. Because that was something that kind of did bring up a bit of like a safety concern when I was busy talking about it in Friday's episode. So the idea for this topic actually started with a question that I saw on Pulse Live Kenya's IG page, which was asked about a week ago, which said, and I quote, "How long should a guy pursue a lady before giving up?" And I saw a bunch of the comments, and when you kind of listen to what a lot of guys say today, and a lot of the talking points that I usually mentioned and repeated and regurgitated from person to person, you kind of start to see some of the similarities in terms of how people were busy talking. And also, it did also kind of show the old dating mentality that used to be there back in the day, which I was talking about in Friday's episode, where people are like, you know what, go in and put in as much work as possible, blah, 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 up until the lady finally notices you and gives you a chance, blah, blah. Which, like I said on that episode, isn't actually a bad mentality to have. It's just that in today's day and age, it's not as optimal. And especially in today's day and age, you find that if you don't have controls for it, it can easily turn into the absolute opposite of what it is that you'd want it to be. So to kind of give a bit of an idea on some of the comments that were given, most people were busy talking about, oh, why pursue a woman? Oh, you should pursue wealth and 5 to 10 seconds, 15 minutes. And some people are busy talking about why should I pursue and I'm the prize and shit. And that was one side. The other side was busy talking about how they put in all 2 weeks of their lives and they gave it their all and now they're happy. And someone else is busy asking why is she playing hard to get. And some women were busy talking about 7 years, bro, read the Bible. And to be quite honest, I kind of found some of these answers to be quite interesting and possibly a little hilarious. But the reality of it is there is no particular set time of anything beyond this point in time is a little too much. One, because the person that's telling you this is probably telling you and they're from a different generation or they're from different circumstances, and the environment itself is what can help determine that. Plus also the kind of girl might probably be the play hard to get type, or they might not. But one thing that I noticed was that there were two main polarizing sides. So there was one side that was like, don't pursue a woman, pursue the money, the women will follow. And there was the other side that was talking about, you can take 2 weeks, you can take a little bit longer. Sometimes you have to prove your value, so just make sure you make your intentions known and you pursue for as long as you need so that you can get the babe that you want. And the thing is, it's not like both of these pieces of advice are bad. It's just that they represent the extremes, and in a vacuum, both of these pieces of advice are particularly shit, if we're being honest and realistic here. Because in a lot of times you hear some people saying one thing, some people saying the other thing, and the reality of it is you always have to reinforce them with other bits and bobs for them to make sense. But in their own kind of cocoons, both of these pieces of advice are actually shit, because you look at the person who's like, just go and prove your value, show your worth, blah, 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 hit on her for as long as you want, make sure you get the woman that you actually do want. And while it's not bad advice, and I've said that before, a lot of people who end up doing this can in very many occasions not understand the difference between someone lacking interest and someone playing hard to get, and they'll end up forcing issues with someone that doesn't really like them at all, getting to the point of possibly even being disrespected. And yes, maybe you can say that's where the line is, but some people don't even know if there is a line to stop at. Then you look at the people who are like, don't pursue women, you pursue wealth, the women will follow. And I'm like, do you people actually live in today's day and age? Because if you think about it, let's assume that you're a guy that is about this mantra to the exact fucking end. And let's say, you've worked on yourself, so you do a lot of work, but you work remotely at home and you go to the gym and maybe you'll do a bit of shopping and then you don't move around as much. You're not the most social butterfly out there, all right? You can actually move an entire day without speaking to a single person, let alone a woman, in your entire day. And there's people that live these lifestyles for months. And you're telling me that pursue wealth, the women will follow you where? If they don't even know you exist, if they don't even know if you're the type to be talked to. You find that some guy is waking up in the morning, he goes to the gym, talks to no one, does his workouts, finishes. He decides he wants to go and grab a snack from the cafe or the restaurant around. He goes, he says hi to the shopkeeper, orders his food, takes it, doesn't talk to anyone, goes to the supermarket, buys some groceries, has his earphones on, pays for shit, goes home, doesn't talk to anyone. And this guy is busy pursuing his wealth, he's stacking up dough, but he is not talking to any women. So the question that I'm going to ask you is, how the fuck is he supposed to be pursued by other women if he's not even open enough to be approached by women, or in places or situations where he can interact with women so that they can actually know who he is, or even figure out if he's worth actually taking a chance on, or even wanting to be with in the first place? At the end of the day, yes, dude is pursuing wealth, but he's not social enough that he can actually be pursued. So does that advice actually make sense? That advice mostly only ever makes sense if you're still a social person, such that you still interact with people, so your social skills aren't completely dead, and you also interact with women, so they can actually notice you and hear about who you are and possibly gauge your personality so that they can be like, you know what, I think I might want to be with this guy. But in the vacuum that most people live in right now, in the bubbles where people work from home and don't interact as much, even in the offices, there's people that don't interact with the opposite sex all that much. Do you really think the whole ignore women, pursue wealth, women will follow type thing will always work? Not really. Not really. Like, for the most part, you have to do a little bit of pursuit of the women, just the same way I will tell the person that is all about go put in as much work as possible to learn when to dial it the fuck down. Alright? So I feel like that is something that definitely needs to be mentioned. And speaking of the guy that continuously pursues the women and puts in all of this effort into getting the babe, like, that shit used to work back in the day because women actually used to play hard to get. Now, I'm not saying that women today are easy or anything, but the whole playing hard to get, the whole like playing hard act isn't something that is practiced by a lot of women today. There's very, very few women that actually do that, if any. And to be very honest, considering that there's not that many women that do that, does that mean that you really need to be putting in all that effort? Like, you kind of have to think about that for a second. Because yes, you're interested in this woman and you're pursuing her and you're trying to show her that you're this really great guy that she should be with. But if she's just not feeling you, like, should you continue pursuing, or are you better off trying to switch up and find someone else? Like, that's usually kind of the gamble for a lot of guys that like to play the whole let me put in as much effort and go for as long as possible. And for most of them, there's usually that fear of, if I don't pursue this woman, then she won't be interested in me. But the reality of it is, like, women also get interested in guys, and the more they like you, the easier the job is for you to actually do. But if they decide to start playing it hard, then, well, maybe they might want you to want them badly enough, but for the most part, they probably just don't want you. Because if they did, they'd probably make things a hell of a lot easier for you, right? And then on top of that, like, you kind of think about it, what exactly is pursuing nowadays? Like, I know I've been discussing everything for like a couple of minutes already, but what exactly classifies as pursuing nowadays? Because if you like the person and they like you back, or they're willing to do some shit with you in the name of intimacy and possibly sex, you guys end up in a situationship pretty quickly, or some version of a friends with benefits. So are you really putting in the pursuit? Like, when you're having the friends with benefits or a situationship, or are you not? Because there's people that get into those hoping to turn it into a full-on relationship. But by the time you're getting there, it's technically not even pursuing anymore. But at the same time, you find that some people need or feel that they should move to that point first before they can get into a relationship of some sorts. So that still feels like a pursuit for them, because they still haven't won, because they haven't achieved the goal. So, like, the whole question of how long you should pursue someone, I don't know. Maybe up until y'all start getting intimate, I think probably makes sense as an answer. Because you're thinking about it, like, maybe the issue isn't how long you should pursue, but what constitutes pursuit. Because when you think about it, technically, the friend zone can also be classified as pursuit. Like, yes, this babe has kind of closed the chapter. She's like, nah, I'm not going to date this guy, blah, blah, blah. Throws him into the friend zone. Like, for her, she sees it as, you know, this guy is just a friend and, you know, he's just being nice to me or some shit like that. But this dude is actively still trying to pursue this woman. So, in some ways, you can't say that it's pursuit, but at the same time, it's not. And I know I'm basically overcomplicating like one very simple, silly question, but like, when you kind of think about it, in today's day and age, what exactly constitutes as pursuit? Like, really? Like, in this day and age of friends with benefits, of situationships, of people being thrown into the friend zone, of babes being in the fuck only zone, like, what exactly constitutes as pursuit? Because if I'm putting in the work to get into a situationship, I probably didn't need to do as much work as someone that's trying to get into a relationship, or even a relationship with the intention of getting married. And someone who's actively pursuing someone just so that they can have some sort of a friends with benefits probably may or may not have to put in as much work, because at the end of the day, different people are going to take a different amount of time to give up the pussy. So to kind of think about it, is there really a length in time? I don't know. I feel like it's more based on interest rather than time. So to be quite honest, I don't think there is a right answer. I just feel like as long as you don't get to a point where you're being disrespected, and as long as the person is actually interested in you, you can take however long you want to take. Just, don't play around with someone's interest. Otherwise, when that shit disappears, they could just drop and move on to someone else. It'll probably take them a hell of a lot faster, because they probably thought that you weren't interested in them. But to kind of conclude all of this, at the end of the day, most of this shit's just practice. You never really know what the entire end goal is for everyone. And the thing with pursuit is, it's a lot less about the time and a lot more about the action and the interest. Because let's be very honest, if we're pursuing people based off of time, then maybe some people would be looking at speed dating as prostitution, or maybe as the better option for dating. Either way, as long as you can retain someone's interest in you, then you can probably go for as long as you'd want. Although, then again, I might be wrong about all of this shit, so I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the breaktime podcast. And on X, it is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end of this episode and this season, as we close it with the next episode. And I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.